Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special event as part of Carnegie Mellon's annual Carnival weekend. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this conversation. I'm Keith Webster, the Helen and Henry Posner Jr. Dean of University Libraries and various other things at CMU, and we're delighted to host Ojas Sawant, an alumnus of the ETC from the class of 2015, and a recipient of one of this year's University Tartans on the Rise Awards. Ojas is a software engineer with a remarkable career spanning AI, computer vision, and cloud technologies. He has worked on depth sensing cameras, AI model optimization, robotics, and extended reality, always pushing the boundaries of how technology can enhance our lives. Currently, Ojas works as a staff engineer at Teragonia, a startup that helps companies integrate data and AI-powered solutions to strategic business challenges. Before his current role, Ojas spent nearly a decade at Intel, innovating at the intersection of AI and software development. Beyond his work in engineering, Ojas has embraced his passion for storytelling, authoring Visual Storytelling with Generative AI, a practical handbook guiding filmmakers and content creators on integrating AI into their craft. His career embodies the ETC spirit, blending technology, creativity, and interdisciplinarity to shape the future. Joining Ojas in conversation today is Schell, Distinguished Professor of Practice at the ETC and CEO of Schell Games. Jesse's visionary work in game design and immersive experiences shaped the game industry, making him the perfect discussant for this afternoon's conversation on the evolving landscape of AI-driven storytelling. I should have got this onto one bit of paper. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Ojas's induction into the 2025 Tartans on the Rise. This is an honours society or an honours programme that recognises the university's recent alumni who are making their impact in their industries and in their communities through leadership and innovation. Ojas joins an outstanding cohort of talented professionals who are shaping the future through their work, and we couldn't be prouder to celebrate his milestone with him today and again tomorrow afternoon when the formal ceremonial event takes place on main campus, I think at 4 o'clock, thereabouts. If you're up there enjoying the carnival rides and booth, do swing past into the School of Drama to join the celebrations. After this afternoon's discussion, and we will allow time for your questions, I would encourage you all to stay for a reception where you'll have a chance to catch up with each other and meet some alumni, have a chance to chat personally to Ojas. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Jesse and Ojas, invite them to climb up onto these chairs. Are you microphoned? And
we're not. There we are. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad that folks could come out for this. It's exciting to be able to talk to Ojas about his adventures after all these years. It's always exciting having any alums come back, but someone who's had as many interesting adventures as you have, there's a lot to talk about. So just in terms of helping folks get to know you a little bit, where did you grow up?
So I grew up, originally I'm from Bombay, India, but I grew up in the Middle East, Kuwait. And then I came here for my undergrad at Purdue University, 4 years spent there. And then CMU ETC.
Okay, so let's talk about Purdue. Like, what did you study there?
So my focus was film and computer science. So I did two things. Computer science was a major, film was my minor. And I did manage to take all the other courses for a major for film, but just did not do the electives, so never got the major. But I did thoroughly enjoy the film part of things along with computers.
Was it were you kind of finding yourself at a crossroads of like, am I going to go into a more tech career, into a more artistic career? What was making that decision like?
Yeah, I think, generally how you feel like, oh yeah, creative stuff, that's going to be fun. And you can, this would be ideal to be in the creative field, and you don't realize until you have like real world experience, like, hey, it's two-sided as well, right? Creative journey is also it's a lot of networking, it's a lot of all the other aspects that come with the creative process. As an engineer or computer science student, you're pretty much in just yourself. So these are two different kind of, personalities and working culture that gotta be like together. So that's where I got a little bit of taste of that, where I was fortunate enough through network or connections, do a little bit of, there's a Bollywood film production company called YRF. So I was with them on like 2 of the sort of movies on some of their post-production stuff. So I got to experience what it is on the creative as well as tech, like what happens. And I think that's where I started to feel like, hey, to be part of the creative industry, but from the technology side, that's the space, at least for me, I felt like that would be a nice thing to have. And that's why, like, it was like, hey, I got a job which is more like, UX kind of a thing right after undergrad. And I suppose just get in. And then I was like, okay, hey, if I want to study more, there's ETC. That has a mix of 2. Like, there's enough weightage towards creative thinking, approach, but there's also tech involved. I think that's where the 2 years just ended up being at ETC.
Yeah. All right. So, when you were at the ETC, what was your focus? What were you really most interested in? What were the things you were really trying to get out of the ETC?
You know how I'm sure most of you probably know, but towards the end of it, everybody's into like jobs and internships. That becomes the focal point. No, but on a serious note, I think throughout the ETC process, it was very interesting for me to stretch in both the ways, where it felt like people are coming from really diverse like backgrounds, like who can talk at the level of like music and sound design and the programming, and they've had some past software engineering experiences too, so they know their thing, and they're artists. And it was just like diverse set of people coming through together to create these constrained projects, right? Like you always have constraints, like do this in this much time. These are the, you always need something to guide you to say that I'm gonna make something work in these constraints. I think that part was interesting. I feel that's what I've carried forward, by the way. Throughout, since after ETC as well.
What were some of the most memorable projects for you at the ETC?
I remember we had one of, how about this? I'll go maybe try to refresh my memory of my own projects. There was one project outside, was it here? It was on the wall. We did the projection thing on multiple floors, and we had some space jumpsuit person we're going to control on a big wall. And it's like you're playing with the gravity concept because it's projected on a big wall. And
Well, this is that one. This is for BBW, right?
Yeah, I think so. Right? I'm trying to remember. I was like, when was that?
No, that was really novel. Yeah, you guys were pretty creative with that in terms of making this giant projection.
And I think that's what, like, I think even Mike mentioned some point of time, like using tech to do something different. Like that was one. Then the other one was your the Hello Ocean, which is like a sensor that moving it. I mean, gyro and accelerometer stuff. That was
right. That was some really early AR stuff. Like this. So that was. I mean, what do you guess? Was 2015, 2016? You're doing that. And,
yeah.
Right, and it was for a classroom, and you could explore like an undersea environment. Right. Yeah, and it was, and I remember seeing the kids engage with that, and they were just so excited to be like walking around undersea with the iPad to look all around. It was that was pretty groundbreaking at the time.
Yeah, no, I still feel like nostalgic about I think it's those projects, the execution of those projects, like the arguments, the debates, the what everybody's passionate about, but ultimately all that passion comes together. Like empathizing about the end user, no matter what it is. And then I think you all have seen this, right? Like every time we watch somebody coming and testing, and you're just like, how are they reacting to my and everybody else's hard work that we were just debating about from, last night. But like, that feedback, validation, like, hey, and adjusting and learning, I think that same stuff is something that I still carry to this day at workplace as well. So
I've got to ask you, had a film background coming into the ETC. Did you have a memorable visual story project?
yes. Actually, before that, I don't know, I remember the acting class here, and there was a lot of, body language stuff.
Yeah, improv with Brenda. Yeah.
And yeah, I think that was, I think I was the most happiest during that time, because there's a lot of physical interaction, analysis, communication, all of those things going on. Apart from the very first orientation, I remember you juggling with the stuff and showing us. I don't know if you guys do you still do it?
Yeah, we still do it.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. I was like, wow, this is very different from, a typical course where you study material and then you give tests, and sure, you will have a capstone project at the end, but this is very hands-on. Everything is hands-on throughout. So I think, sorry, I didn't answer your visual story question like straight to the point, but we did have a music video that we tried to make, I think, which was a little like the artist person on my team, and we came up with this. Again, it's like an AR music video. I think I remember it was more like, hey, there's a card, and in the card there's like, somebody's playing cards with what is it? There's like a tank, and there's like army people, and then they come into real life, and there's like animations coming in. I don't know. It was something all over the place, but it was cool, fun about like, hey, what can we do realistically with the time and the people and people's capabilities to make it work into a short music video format. I think that was one of the things.
All right, so you graduate from the ETC, and of course, like all students, you're all jobs focused. And so where do you go right after the ETC?
Yeah, so I joined Intel, and of course, it started with an internship. So I remember this very clearly. I was at GDC, the GDC trips that we do, and there was a session about this Intel RealSense depth camera, blah, blah, blah. They're going to do some, hand tracking stuff.
The RealSense, that was kind of like their version of the Xbox Kinect. Kind of.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So it's depth sensing camera with Kinect kind of thing, but it's this form factor and only does like hand and face tracking kind of things at that time.
I remember the TV ad had, what's his name from Big Bang Theory on it. But anyway, all right, but all right,
I know.
So you're seeing a RealSense demonstration here.
Yes. And the session got over, and they're like, oh, yeah, we think this is going to be helpful for, like, all kinds of use cases. Some of them can be gaming and blah, blah, blah. And here's C++, SDKs and tools that we have. And, of course, I'm trying to look for the internship thing. And, so there's a Q&A session at the end. So, I mustered up the courage to go back, and I'm like, hey, I have to ask a question that has to be memorable, something that person will remember. Hopefully I can build my network and some connections and like provide value, that why I'm valuable. I don't know. So a lot of things were going on. I don't remember much of it, but I did ask some question and gave some feedback, and we were doing a lot of Unity stuff at that time. So it was like, hey, Unity and this depth sensing and the APIs and tools and utility and prefabs and things that we can like do to make people's life easier. Something of that sort. I don't know what I said. But that kind of stuck out to him in that session. And then that, I still remember walking up during, like, on the fifth floor in the stairs, like, on the phone, and there's, like, more interview. Hey, by the way, for summer, any plans? And then that kind of, like, got me the internship at Intel on the
Wow. So you were at GDC, which you think, okay, looking for games jobs. This is a little outside of the normal game situation. How did you feel about that? Were you more interested in going into games, or were you already thinking about tools and systems? Yeah,
that is a good question. I think that is a question that I always grapple with throughout, up until like today, as to You know, there's this thing where every time you want to say, okay, is this the right thing to do? Should I be doing this or not? And usually it makes you uncomfortable. I think that's where I was like, hey, I know most of my friends are going to be trying on game studios, the alumni who were visiting at that time. And I was like, okay, this is way off. Like nobody, like Intel, it's nothing connected to this, what we're doing here. But it just felt that was making me feel weird. And then I was like, hey, I don't know why, I just feel, if it's making me feel uncomfortable, it means I got to try and do it. So that kind of, okay, what is the value add that I can bring, probably the way they are. And I think it kind of worked eventually. After joining, I realized that the team that I was part of interning, they were focused on APIs and they don't come from the gaming background. So having somebody as an intern, documentation, tutorials, demos, apps, something visual, how can we improve the Unity integration, can we actually have something? All of that sort of came from the intern's lens. And then I did some we got a present during my internship at CES that year. So I got a CES presentation experience out of it at the end. And there's an IDF conference that used to happen, so that as well. So yeah, it was like all of this. I started to feel like, where do I fit? Generally, and that's the other things, like identifying the gap in the team. And if you can find that spot where you can positively contribute, even though everybody's an engineer, everybody's doing the same thing. I think that's where I found like my thing during the internship that led to the full-time after that.
So talk about this transition from internship to full-time. Was it right after? Or was it,
No, I think I came back on campus and I did my last semester at the EA place, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you did like summer at Intel and then maybe a fall at EA, something like that, or?
I think it was summer and a few months in towards the end of the year, and then Jan to May graduation, I was back, I think, at ETC, and then after that I graduated, something like that.
So how did the full-time opportunity happen?
Yeah, that was my thing. Like towards the end of the internship, of course, I'm trying my best. I'm like, I know before I go back to campus, I got to try my best to get the full time, because once I go back, nothing's gonna happen. So I did try to do that, and I think it's the networking, where of course there were the amazing sort of software engineers and architects, passionate, deep knowledge with at Intel, hardware as well as software. Compared to them, of course, my background is pretty much not that there. So, but the things that I knew that I'm confident in, like user experience, developer experience, holding on to that was enough to show value. Partly with the person who actually gave me the opportunity through the internship. I'm still in touch with him. He's still my mentor. I still ask him when I do my next, transition, like, hey, I'm planning on doing this. What do you think? But the idea is sorry, I forgot. I moved kind of sideways.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
With a lot of memories. I think I was saying.
Just talk about doing the transition to full time, because that's everyone always wonders about that exactly.
Yeah, I think that was the letter before getting back on campus. Having that was important. So I did try that, and I think to show value, what is it that you get out of me? It's a different perspective, even though I'm not as capable from my engineering past experience. But it's this specific thing that I can definitely contribute to and have opinions about, and native plugins. So the full-time job was in the same. So previously, it was more of an enabling team, developer side of story. But then when I joined full-time, I joined the RealSense SDK team. So I was in the SDK team writing. Managing the Unity SDK integration of the depth sensing camera and all the algorithms. So it was more like, hey, I got a good exposure and experience working with hand tracking, face tracking, SLAM, all the various algos that can be possible with a depth sensing camera. But again, same thing. Every time it's all about, hey, if you've integrated an API, you got to teach people how to use those APIs. You have tutorials and samples and documentation, and then you have some visual demos, samples that people feel excited to use. I think that's what I stuck to throughout, and I think so. My first 2 years was pretty much on that team.
Got it. So you spent 10 years at
Yeah.
Intel. So walk us through kind of it sounds like you kind of shifted from team to team a bit. Give us like the quick tour of the types of projects you worked on there.
Yeah, so I guess the first 2 years was this real sense and depth sensing camera stuff. Then, in general, I'm pretty open-ended in things rather than sticking to one thing for a very long time. Just go with the flow sometimes with what comes through, what opportunity arises. So I think with that, it kind of transitioned from there to Intel at some point of time was doing and it's public as well, so like Project Alloy, which was what Quest is, all-in-one headset HMD, before, and they were the first people to also be part, while again, HTC at that time was doing, a bunch of other folks were saying from inside-out tracking, outside-in tracking, we go to inside-out tracking. And,
So, let me ask about making this transition. So you're going from the RealSense team to this headset sort of team. Was this like the team made the transition, or you saw an opportunity and you switched? How does that work when you
so
switch?
this one was partial. It was the team was still working on the things that existed before.
Yep.
But it was also doing a side thing where this project was up, and when I used to evangelize myself in the company, saying, "Hey, I'm totally into like XR," is like that's what my grad school was. It's all about we've done this, all these headsets, and you guys are trying to make something. So like I do understand. I'm equally passionate about this. So when the time came for Project Alloy, of course it's not me, right? There is a whole bunch of teams with hardware and the sensors, the RealSense cameras as well, and all of these guys coming in together to sort of deliver a product which has to have a battery life that doesn't heat up and can last for so long with all those problems the first time. There is a layer of saying, okay, so if you want to make same thing like demos and go to CES, and how do you need to have some kind of a developer interaction to make stuff, and you need some APIs that talks to the graphics engine and fuses all these algos together and does the compute for hand tracking, but in a different sense. So same process. So I think that the transition was more like me convincing, making sure everybody knew that I'm passionate about this. And again, I found my manager at that time, who was fortunate, like she believed in whatever so far had brought up to the table, and I stuck to my thing. It's user experience. It's about the user in the end is what I'm more than the code, the way it runs. Like I'm sure I'm about the code as well, performance, but the experience matters. So all of that, I think somehow it happened where the team was focused on one thing, and we were trying to expand and say, yeah, from this team, one resource you get on this other project. And then that's where it's like, hey, got to fly down to Israel a couple of times and propose the architecture for things on how the API should be inside Unity being the primary engine, and there is a mix. Of course, at that time there was nothing called mixed reality. Later, but before that, it was like, hey, yeah, it's like an AR thing. It's fully like on screen, but it's not a see-through, right? It's on there, and then you're going to render the whole live cameras on the things. And of course, it's too early and work for some time, and hand tracking, you can see the hands. What can you do with it? So yeah, all that stuff, I think that was some good time. So yeah.
All right. So you go from this RealSense, you go into these kind of mixed reality headsets, and then what happened?
Then I think that we try for some time, and then of course, right, like projects come, projects go, projects start. So I think there came a time where, of course, there are other people, and things were just not working out, basically. So then, right as that was about to sort of wind down, at this point of time, same team, of course, the team was still working on the other things, right? I was just one thing on the side doing another project that's XR related. So I still had that to go back to. But again, sometimes the teams do change. So there were small mini projects or opportunities that came where the team remained the same when I got back. But the stuff that we did kind of changed. It was still about developer tools, but from a different sense. It became all about IoT stuff, which is sensors and message buses and queues and
Okay, so the Internet of Things kind of interfaces.
yes.
Okay.
So, but in that same thing, I hook up to that. Cool. I learn all this knowledge, but dashboards, 3.js, like using visual way of having these things. I remember the Google I/O. Google has that event, right? Once a year.
Yeah, Google
so-
I/O, yeah.
Right. So over there, I think try to do this thing where at that time the AR core on the Android just started to come up.
Yeah.
So if you can have like IoTs and sensors fused on a device to go show at the Google I/O event that talks about all these buses and onboarding stuff, remote compute, but visualize that in a AR core format. It's nothing that's it's going to develop value in terms of business, but it gets people talking about, hey, what does the rest of the stack help and do?
Okay.
You see, so
Yeah.
so that gave me a lot of again, buses and IoT side of things.
Okay.
And then I left after that. Roughly, my period has been every 2 years or so. I think that I've been kind of switching because I think 2 years is at least at that time I felt is enough time to really know the team, the people, whatever you're working on, actually deliver real value and impact. Less than that is too soon. More than that is you might just decide to stay by for long. At least that's what I felt. So it's like, okay,
Okay.
2.5 years. And then from there, then I got an opportunity to do, I think there are two things. There's like a 5G stuff was coming across at that time, and it was early 5G time frames where phones were yet to come.
We'll call it 4.9G. How about that?
Sure. Yeah, it's after 3, but little 5. But yeah, so I think during that time, another opportunity arose where it's like, hey, at this time I switched. Found the people and somehow managed to internally switch. And this team focused on, of course, stack is very different. It's Kubernetes and 5G. There's FPGAs to simulate 5G. It's very different, but yeah, it still ties back to the thing where what's the use case for all this?
Yeah.
That's where, back again to the ETC.
Yeah,
where
so,
it's like,
let me ask you, so you're working on this big variety of different technologies. So what are some of the things you think of as these are things that came from the ETC that you were able to use kind of across these projects?
Yeah, I think the number one is user first thinking.
Okay.
And the constrained way of working, as I mentioned at the beginning as well, where it's like your project always has constraints. It always has diverse set of people. Okay, the diverse part I'll come a little later, but the constraints about do something, because if you have infinite resources, infinite time, and infinite money, then yeah, your product, whatever you're doing, working on, I think it just becomes much more polished when you have those constraints in place. And I think that's what ETC was there. Even though there were conversations, but at the early, of course, I didn't have to deal with the budget and those kind of aspects. But it always, my thought process just went how we can do something for less, quick, and what's the minimum thing we can do for that thing. And that just throughout the process where some ideas and projects and use cases and demos are you would go hire somebody outside in an agency to do, but hey, no, we can do this as a thing just to see if something works. So that it helps because you're always thinking of how to get something done in a constrained fashion throughout. So that was one.
Okay. What have you learned about in all this time, doing these different types of projects? What has really stuck with you about teamwork?
Teamwork. Yeah, I think that's the main other thing I feel at ETC, just because we work with different people with different background and different things that people are passionate about as well, which result in conflicts as well. In the real sort of workplace, it translated into product designers, there's UX designer, there's a program manager that's running among things, there's the engineer, there's the architect, there's a manager, there's the various functions, and they all coming together. For me to even convince to pitch something, to communicate, I think, at least I felt at ease just because we've done this at ETC. We've just not been like with a bunch of engineers together the entire time, and then when we come to the real place, you have to interact with all the other people running the product and the job. So that was much easier because of ET is what I feel. But apart from that, I think the notion of empathizing with each of those personas, I think. Right? That is where it's like, yeah, I'm able to communicate, and each of those individual people still do like to work and collaborate with Ojas. It just happens, not necessarily just one kind of people are like, oh yeah, he's great, and the designer's like, yeah, he's too full of himself. No, it didn't happen that way. So I think it all just came through because of this, because we go through and we know how to sort of adapt and tailor, compromise in places and push for sometimes in places. I think that balance, that I still do. So even till this, up till yesterday.
So over time at Intel, you went from different kinds of projects, some real variety in the sorts of projects you worked on. How did you find your responsibility changing over time? Were you always was it always sort of the same sort of responsibilities project to project, or over time did your responsibilities change?
Yeah, it definitely changed. I think it became from being an engineer who was having an creative sort of user experience focused kind of contributor to like, hey, tech lead, to an architect, and then from there, an engineering manager. And then again, between manager and being hands-on, it's a little bit of everything, back and forth, back and forth. I don't think I fixed myself to one point. I'm still in touch with almost, some of the folks that I've worked back at Intel, because now I'm at a different company. But that's the thing, I think those connections, right? Like different people working, being able to talk in their language, and also like the front-end person and the back-end person and the cloud person and the DevOps automation person and the site reliability engineer who only works the cloud side of things. A little bit of like everything to still talk to different people and then still help to sort of go back and forth and move the things forward. And I think that has kind of helped build those sort of relationships that even now, then over time it became into a mentoring thing, like, hey, I just want to run by a few things. What's the next thing to do, kind of. So I do that sometimes on the side. So yeah, so I think that kind of went, and up until I left Intel and joined Teragonia 3 months ago as a staff engineer. So yeah.
Got it. All right. So that's a big change, going from this giant company with hundreds of thousands of people to like Teragonia.
30, I think now it's 30 people probably.
Right. You got 20 30 people.
30.
Now, at some point you started working on AI. Were you doing that at Intel before you?
Yes, at Intel. So after the cloud stuff, we started to, AI is in all kinds of shapes and sizes, right? From your IoT land, you have traditional machine learning way of doing things, and then you have the computer vision way of doing things. You saw a bit of that in real sense. I think all those depth sensing cameras and algos, they were just early ways of doing AI. People were essentially doing that, training recognizers and connectors and things like that, right? And then now you have come into this whole language model, and this small language model, large language model, AI agents, and then there's like the whole frameworks for just AI agents. There's all kinds of things that have been growing.
Yeah.
So my journey started from, I skipped the traditional ML part. I just got to see a little bit of that through the IoT phase.
Yeah.
But then after that, with computer vision and AI, I think that's where things started coming more hands-on, a little on that end. And again, my depth always was never, like, I couldn't apply for a job for being an algorithm engineer for a specific, AI thing.
Yeah.
But I know at that level enough to say, okay, if, the depth of something, is it good and how much is good enough? If it's too high level, then you're like, oh yeah, what do you know? Like, it's too high level, yeah, sure. Versus it's like, how deep? If you're so deep, then you're just focused in it. Somewhere in between that fine level balance, because it's always focused on how is this thing going to be used in the end. Is it for an app? Is it for like, I don't know, like tracking for, like real like shoplifting stuff, or whatever the use cases there are, like what are these algorithms going towards, I think. So that level of understanding in terms of engineering a bit of this Kalman filter, smoothing out things, just at high level what is required. I think that's how deep I kept going before like going too deep in something and being like, that's where I am, my lifetime focus is. Okay, so from computer vision AI, it kind of went towards I think almost it was pretty common that most people started to go into language models as a very early research thing. So towards the end, I think my last role at Intel, I got an opportunity to take some existing sort of product that existed before in some form as a local one, and sort of put it back and pitch for a developer tool for developers to optimize their AI models without really learning. Because I realized even as a user, like quantization and shrinking the model for the RAM, it's a lot of steps. Like if you spend so much time in training a model, how much time are you going to spend more to optimize the model that you trained? It's a lot of effort to know and do those things. Can that be simplified? Again, it's not just my idea, but like...
Right, but again, it's that user, like what's going to make this useful?
Useful,
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
So that's where that thing came, like, hey, put this into a cloud SaaS kind of a product where developers can come in and optimize their models, and they get to test them on Intel hardware.
Okay.
So without even buying, you know what you want to buy if it runs and fits your demand.
And right around this time, this is when you wrote your AI and film book.
I think maybe I started to experiment for the book around that time. Was it? Yeah, I think you're right. Around that time, because started to experiment much earlier, before it was like text to image. There were a lot of models on like Hugging Face, and that's like the app store for all the models, right?
Yeah.
And people are putting all kinds of like models. Hey, it can generate a ship, and look, it can produce an image by talking to it. It was those early forms at that time. I started to experiment, download, set that up, and see how it's behaving and interacting just through images, and realizing that the vocabulary that we use in film, lighting, composition, color grading, all those things, the AI understands. So if you can communicate in that language, you might just get a better output. So this is what was the seed of an idea that said, like, okay, you know what?
It's a really unique book. I hadn't seen it. It wasn't what I expected. Knowing your background, and I heard about it, I'm like, okay, it's going to be all about like the systems that you need to build in order to make film type systems, and nope, this is not it at all. Like this is 100% for filmmakers who want to do quick visualization using AI. It's almost like, hey, you're looking for a crash course in how to do quick visualizations. And 100% connect. What I love about it is it brings together your so many of your passions, right? You've got this film background, but you know how to go deep into technology, and you're never satisfied unless it's like this is actually useful. So it was clear, like you're building this bridge between, okay, here's how you're going to use this technology in order to be useful as a filmmaker. So yeah, no, it's wonderful.
Yeah, no, I think the useful part, that's interesting that it's a pattern that you've taken out. Yeah, making things useful. So yeah, I think.
So then you make this big change. Just a few months ago, you step away from Intel and you come to this small company. Like, so what prompted that? What made you make this big step?
Yeah, I think same, identifying the gap. The gap is one thing. So I decided to sort of, hey, I always wanted to try this out in a different environment. It's been 10 years, right? Even though I kept changing teams and people, it's still culturally we are the same, right? Because you're in the same company. So how does that affect my interaction and my growth when the culture is very different? So I always wanted to try, and then somehow, this opportunity sort of came through. And as part of that, so hey, small company, things move much faster. They're very rapid. And as I learned about the role, in fact, the role was not actually there. When I applied, it was something completely different. But then after a while, through interviews and stuff, like they found the gap and I found the gap that, we both could contribute. So I think that's how I kind of worked. But the same thing, like the company is diverse in terms of, mergers and acquisitions, M&A folks, analytics engineers, data engineers, data scientists, and AI ML engineers. And then there's the engineering. It's a diverse set of people coming together, delivering AI-based solutions to the private equity portfolio company market. So again, right, the thing remains the same. It's diverse set of people, diverse backgrounds, coming together, even in this form here, and kind of working. So that was my motivation to relocate after Oregon. It's 10 years in Oregon to Chicago. So it was a big move for my wife and I as well. So
got it.
Yeah.
So I know we got some questions. I definitely want to go to those, but I guess one thing I want to ask you before we jump into those, a lot's happening in AI really fast right now. What advice do you have for students who are like getting ready to go into industry, who are looking for a way to get up to speed on the changes that AI is kind of bringing? Do you have any thoughts about that? Ways that the right way to kind of get up to speed on this quick?
Talking from my engineering side, when you write code, it's deterministic. You write code to perform a certain action and you get the result out. Sure, you have your bugs and things, but that's what you're doing. With AI, it's all predictive, right? What you do, it's going to learn, it's going to transform. You might not get the same thing the second time you run it. It's going to change. Indirectly, you know that, hey, this is just a lot more experimentation. So algos and concepts and things, that's okay, whatever field of AI and what aspect you're using, but it just requires a lot of trial and error, experiment to get a good grasp of what that is. If it's a very specific, models that only generate images, or I'm using an AI model for speech to text, or I'm doing this in some game, whatever that is, that detail level understanding through a lot of self-experimentation, because models are going to change, that there's new concepts, there's always going to be new architectures from transformer to something else, and they're going to keep evolving. There's going to be next big cool thing. But as it comes and before the next thing comes in that window of time, whatever that is, how detailed are you able to communicate the gaps, the limitations, what it is good at, what it is bad at. I think that might be the differentiation factor to know, and then keep catching up, because it's a rapid thing. It's changing so fast. So
that totally makes sense. So what I hear you saying is get in there, start using it, because nobody really has the answers right now. But the more you get used to getting yourself up to speed on the new thing, then you can get up to speed on the next one even faster. Yeah.
Yeah, and it helps, right? Because even those guys who are developing the next version of something, they're building off of the constraints, the limitations of the last thing, right? That's the improvement. So even if there was, your GPT 3.0 mini, and then 4, and so on, but you would be confident enough to say, I knew what really worked in 3 and how I got something useful, and now in 4 what it is. But again, I think that applies to everything.
Got it. All right, there's a lot of great questions here. Let me, I can pick out some good ones here. We got one, can you share a good story from your past experience with user-centric thinking? So when did you start to, when did this really kind of click with you that like user-centric thinking was important, and like where is a place where you felt like, yeah, that made a big difference in something we worked on?
I mean, the very first, I think, is probably from ETC, of course. And I think Mike would tell you that, like, is that the Hello Ocean project was the main one where, like, we thought this, and as an engineer, I was like, cool, sensor fusion, moving graphics at that time. But, like, seeing that sort of feedback and how the children were reacting, and, oh, no matter how much we thought what it should be, the real thing is very different. I think that was the first impact moment, and it's kids, right? It's as raw as you can get. Like, it's not adults who are being a little more diplomatic, making sure nobody's feelings are hurt, and you know how they're reacting. There's nothing. It's just, it's pure. So with that, we could just see the impact and how we changed, and hey, you can see the engagement change. So that was the first time. Well, the usefulness, I think that aspect came.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's definitely a smart question here, which often discussed among students. So you've got experience doing documentation and creating user experience stuff, as well as the engineering and programming. And so someone's asking, like, well, how can you best showcase user experience work and documentation work as opposed to programming work, which is a little more concrete and a little easier to showcase? Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, okay, there's two aspects, right? A lot of product designers in the SaaS model of things, they have a portfolio of body of work. You go
hang
to
on.
right?
What's the SaaS model of things?
So software as a service, like any tool that you
right.
use,
Got it. Okay.
Right? Anything that you use online. So there's a designer saying, oh, Instagram should look like this today, and tomorrow it's going to look completely, we're going to revamp and overhaul this thing. They will have that in a portfolio of things that, hey, this was my work, this was my work, this was my work. It's a slide. And I've seen during some of the interviews, during my interview process, some candidates even had a demo reel, a fancy demo reel of like various bodies of work, and clearly articulating what the problem was, what the goals were of the product, and how did my design help solve those things. That really came out. So I think some of this aspect in terms of design, I think, is very much that body of work, demo reel showcase. I still do whenever possible, because I do understand moving between organizations and companies, and regulations like content that you cannot share with somebody else, the stuff that you've been, that's not public, right? But like, I do keep my whatever notes and things, because for the next role, it's like all that stuff that happened in the past that nobody ever knows.
Right.
It's going to take me forward to the next thing. So I think that having your own encyclopedia of the work, wherever possible, helps.
Okay, so you're saying like keeping all that stuff that, all your notes and everything about how the product changed, so that you can kind of showcase, look, here's how it was, and here's what we turned it into.
Yes, I think, yes. Yeah. The more detail, because not every time it's all kinds of things, like things that people come in between to change or transform or update something. People are coming sometimes when they're just requirements on a Jira board that just says, oh, come up with a product that should allow to do X and Y and Z. And
yeah.
So there's all kinds of different things, but whatever, you can still articulate what the goals were, what the business need was, and how did I approach the solution for it. And having that somehow documented and kept over time, so we can speak in interviews as well as if it's, if it's allowed and stuff, like if issues, you can show that work to somebody else.
Okay, and we got a couple related questions here. Somebody asking about how AI is starting to be part of the art process, and a big part of your book is like, hey, filmmakers. Here's how you can use that for some pre-visualization. How do you, when you think about this, how do you think about the sort of ethics side of this, as well as like how do you think this is going to kind of change the world of digital artists?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, it's two-sided. At least at that time of writing the book, my opinion in general is, like today, if you see you see this great laptop piece and you decide, oh, I'm gonna redraw it myself and recreate it, great. But you take that and then you post it on somewhere publicly as your original piece of art, then that platform is going to flag you and say that, hey, this thing exists, it's a copy of something else.
Yeah.
But you are allowed to recreate it in your brain and interpret it and change it and draw it if you wanted to. When you published it somewhere else, then it became a problem, because otherwise, in theory, even like you're digesting every movie that you're watching, every script that you're reading, it's all somehow going back into your thoughts to mix and merge, and something else comes out of it, which is an inspiration. Right? On film sets, you do that. Oh yeah, I'm looking for that style like The Godfather with like mixed in with that kind of, you always talk with references to things.
Yeah.
Right? That's what that comes. So I feel on the AI and the visual side, like it's in that mode. Again, this is just my opinion. I'm sure a lot of people do not agree to that. But like it is where, yeah, AI is a thing in between that has looked at a lot of things just like we human do, and has combined and digested, and then it's producing content. Now, if somebody else is going to make money with the content produced, if you put it somewhere else, just like if you would recreate some movie exactly the same way and put it somewhere else, and then it's a wrong thing to do, the same rules should apply to what the outputs of AI is as well. In terms of training, same thing, like where did the data set come? If it was public, if you as a human could go and find it out it was public on Google and get inspired by it, and the Studio Ghibli, like if I get great at Studio Ghibli and draw it myself, just because I saw on Google Images, sure, AI also looked at it, and now ChatGPT can do Studio Ghibli style images pretty well. So it's the same thing, whether somebody else made money, did not give, that same problems, the way you would address solutions to for humans should apply for AI, is my perception. Might not be the right thing, or people might have different opinions.
Yeah, no, it's complicated. Everybody's trying to work it out. Like, do the laws need to change? How do they need to change? And
correct.
So it's a lot happening fast. Yeah,
it's a long question. So because of that, like instead of producing stuff or working on things that are public facing, that is going to go through all of this, the application of pre-production planning. I think some of the projects I saw today as well, right? Like there's a lot of planning phase, and right before you put in the effort and the time to execute the thing, there's a lot of brainstorming that happens pre-work before the actual thing begins. Can I do all of this visually? I'm not putting this out there to the public. I'm just helping us humans communicate better through just from images to now it's a little more videos and through clips, and it's like animatics or like video from a storyboards, short lists, all of those aspects that happen whether it's in-game shots or anything that you want to plan visually. Previously we only could do that as an image. Now you can do it as a video, and you're not hurting anybody because it's not like it's a feature film. It is all pre-planning, experimentation, iteration, just so that the actual thing that you continue to do today can be much better quality when you really get to it.
Okay. So we talked a bit here about how AI is changing the visual arts and some of the issues around that. How are you feeling about the world of coding? You've been involved in kind of the software engineering world for most of your career. When you look and think, okay, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, how is we're hearing more and more the phrase vibe coding, where
yes.
instead of actually coding, you're just kind of talking to an AI and kind of guiding it, like a software architect would guide a junior programmer. Do you think that's going to become the norm? What do you think sort of the future of software is here from what you've seen?
I mean, it goes either ways but what I think it's more of an assistive thing, right? Like, there are programmers who still exist. I want to code in Vim, right? Or VI, which is just terminal interface to code the whole thing. Then came those people who are like, hey, I want to use an editor to write my code who can predict and say autocomplete. Now are the people who are saying, hey, there are people who do that, who rely on that. And there are other people now like, hey, there's AI stuff that's generating poop, 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 the whole half thing there. But at every level, as you see, I feel like it's about getting iterations, whatever you're building, you just need to get to that thing faster and have multiple iterations to finally have a better thing. To get to that point, including in the coding sense, between the guy who's a purist in terms of writing code in VI or Vim to a person who's using these tools, only if that individual knows the actual code and the concepts and things can the person guide the assistant to do the thing faster for him. So I feel it's a collaborative thing, and using it, because you can only instruct it as many things as you really know about it, right? I can't just say, go make something X. Versus I think, yeah, I need to make sure that there is a cloud platform, put a load balancer in the front that can, auto scale and go down, blah, blah, blah. And then because you know microservices and blah, blah, you can direct it in the direction. First, you have to know the knowledge about those concepts of technology.
Yeah.
And then you can just do it faster because you would sit and write, I don't know, like they say, Terraform automation and deployment. You would do all that, find the syntax, go to Google. That stuff is like, because the syntax changed now maybe than what it was in version 1.0. That's fast because it knows what's the latest thing, what's the new change. You can direct it fast and get to the end result faster. So I feel like the other extreme, people who are completely in a vibe coding, it's the same thing, right? We say sometimes things are easier to go from 0 to 30%, but then to go to 100% of something, it really takes a lot of. That's the same thing I feel with this, with like vibe coders. Yeah, you can get something working great.
So you think that might be more like for quick and dirty prototypes and pre-visualization maybe is where the value is?
Great, yes. And it'll help you with all of that stuff. But from there to get something really out there. I don't know if you've seen some of those memes, like, I don't know, I saw it on LinkedIn somewhere where somebody was, oh yeah, I got this thing to work in my product and I don't know much about coding and it's like out there and it's great. And then then there's a follow-up post to that says, oh my God, I don't know why there's so many like repetitive attacks happening and my rate limiting is happening. Things are crashing. Like, oh, I don't know. I'm not a coder. I don't know how to debug this anymore. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have just said that I did this vibe coding for it. Like, like that's the quality difference. Like from this to that.
Right.
So I think it's great as a quick thing, as well as for the people who know their thing. They can still do things faster and guide it and catch the errors and mistakes and the hallucinations that do occur from the AI itself. Yeah.
Okay. Well, last question I have is, so for current ETC students, what are some things that you would suggest as you look back so that they can best take advantage of their time at the school? Things that you feel, either things you're like, I wish I'd done more of that, or I'm so glad that I did that while I was at school.
I think during my 2 years, I just remember doing a lot of things very quickly in a short span of time. But the ability to go back and retrospect, like, why did I do something? What was the problem statement that we were specifically trying to address? And how did we go about finding a solution for whatever that problem or scenario was?
Yeah.
That, I feel, initial stages was helpful for me to articulate during real jobs. because you can do projects that everybody else does, like some of the other programs might do. You can pass tests, and your resume will look exactly the same as every other resume that did the same project from the same school or whatever other school. And there's only so many different things you can ask. Oh, why do you choose this algorithm versus that? Why this versus that approach? But with ETC, everything is hands-on, and it's a different project, which is completely like very different from one to the other. So you can really, like, your answer to the next person's answer, unless you're on the same team, will be 100% different as what was your learning things. Why did I decide to go through this? And how did I arrive at that solution? I think that is what, as an interviewer on this side, at least when I interview, like I try to evaluate that. Like, are you able to, you did things because they just had to be done and move on to the next thing? Or I really want to know, like, you as a, because technologies change, skills change, time changes, but your ability to adapt and dive deeper or breadth or just, kind of fluff it out, that is what you're looking for as a candidate who can adapt and as, company changes and transforms. So I think those things we are getting an opportunity to do at ETC from day one. So I think whatever towards the end I could remember, I did articulate in my jobs. But at the beginning, it's a little blurry. So I'm like, that's definitely, I would.
Got it. So so taking the time to kind of, okay, what did I actually learn on that project, to kind of pull that wisdom out, because the experiences happen, but when you can pull that wisdom out, particularly in an interview situation or something, that's what people are looking for. They're like, what did you learn out of these projects? That totally makes sense. Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much, Ojas.
Thank you for having me.
All right, what happens next? Anyone know? All right, we got some snacks and things in the back, and Ojas, you're going to be here to chat with folks, and I believe we have some copies of your books around. If yeah, all right, it's a good book, and would you be willing to sign books for people? Yes. All right, so you can be able to get a signed copy of Ojas' book if you are interested. All right, thanks everybody.